The small town of Dillon, Montana, had carried a heavy shadow for nearly 2 decades. On a crisp morning in September 2001, 12-year-old Lily Harper had disappeared while riding her bicycle along a quiet backroad near her home. At the time, the investigation had been exhaustive yet frustratingly inconclusive. Local police had canvassed neighborhoods, interviewed neighbors, and coordinated with the State Highway Patrol, but no concrete leads emerged. Lily's disappearance left the community rattled, her family desperate for answers that never came. Her parents, Megan and Peter Harper, had spent years alternating between hope and despair, clinging to any fragment of information that might suggest she was alive. Her younger brother, only 8 at the time, carried a quiet fear that never fully subsided, a lingering uncertainty that shadowed his childhood. For years, the case remained cold, archived in files and forgotten folders. Yet the story of Lily Harper never truly left the minds of the Dillon residents. Teachers at her school remembered her laughter and her bright curiosity. Neighbors recalled the small gestures of kindness she displayed, and friends continued to hope for her return, however improbable it seemed. Police officers who had worked the case long ago spoke of their frustrations and regrets, wondering if there had been missed clues, overlooked witnesses, or signs too subtle for them to notice. The passage of time blurred memories, but it could not erase the sense that someone in Dillon knew more than they had ever revealed. By 2018, advances in forensic science and investigative technology reignited interest in old cold cases across Montana. Detectives specializing in cold cases reviewed hundreds of unsolved disappearances, looking for patterns, connections, and evidence that modern techniques could finally clarify. When Lily Harper's case resurfaced, investigators noticed subtle details in the original reports: a fleeting sighting by a local store clerk, a photograph discovered in a discarded folder, and inconsistencies in the statements of a man who had been a neighbor at the time. Though these pieces had seemed minor, new technology allowed for detailed analysis. DNA testing had advanced, surveillance records could be re-examined, and digital mapping of the neighborhood provided a fresh perspective on the day Lily vanished. Detective Karen Lang, assigned to the renewed investigation, approached the case with a combination of meticulous planning and psychological insight. She reviewed every witness account, reconstructing timelines and cross-referencing statements with geographic and environmental data. She studied human behavior patterns, how a 12-year-old might respond to strangers, how witnesses recall events under stress, and how memory can distort or preserve critical details over time. By overlaying psychological principles with factual analysis, Lang began to form a portrait of the likely scenarios and potential suspects. One breakthrough came when investigators revisited the photograph discovered years earlier in a community bulletin board. The image was grainy, but it depicted a man near the location where Lily was last seen, carrying an object that matched the description of Lily's bicycle basket. Using modern image enhancement techniques and facial recognition software, detectives identified the man as Gregory Mason, a local handyman who had lived on the same block as the Harper family in 2001. Mason's name had appeared in minor investigative notes from the original case, but there had been insufficient evidence to pursue him. Now, with advanced forensic tools and a deeper understanding of criminal psychology, he became the focal point of renewed scrutiny. Lang's team began discreet surveillance of Mason, piecing together his movements over the years. They discovered a pattern of transient work across several counties, occasional arrests for minor infractions, and unexplained absences during periods coinciding with other local reports of missing children. Interviews with former neighbors revealed odd behaviors that had seemed inconsequential at the time. Mason's tendency to loiter near playgrounds, his curiosity about children he did not know, and his ability to charm adults while keeping a cautious distance from authorities. These behavioral patterns, when examined through a psychological lens, raised red flags that strengthened the investigation. Forensic teams obtained samples from Mason's current residence, comparing them against evidence preserved from 2001. Hair fibers, latent fingerprints, and other trace materials were meticulously analyzed. Every match, however minor, contributed to the growing picture of Mason's involvement. The psychological dimension also played a critical role. Lang and her colleagues consulted with behavioral experts who helped predict Mason's responses to questioning, likely hiding strategies, and potential confessions. This insight guided interrogation planning and evidence presentation, ensuring that investigators could approach the suspect in a manner most likely to yield truthful information. Meanwhile, the Harper family remained unaware of the intricate work unfolding behind the scenes. Megan Harper continued her quiet life, often visiting the spots where Lily had been last seen, leaving flowers, and speaking softly to the memory of her daughter. Peter Harper, who had once been a prominent community volunteer, now devoted himself to advocacy for families of missing children, using his own experience to help others navigate the uncertainty and fear that cold cases generate. The family's resilience, though constantly tested, became a source of motivation for the investigative team. The desire to provide closure drove every decision, every late-night review of evidence, and every consultation with forensic experts. Detective Lang finally secured the legal permissions necessary to confront Mason. A careful approach was essential. Any misstep could compromise the integrity of the case. The arrest was executed quietly at his current residence, with minimal risk to neighbors or bystanders. When Mason realized he was in custody, his initial reaction was calm, almost detached. However, Lang and her team observed subtle signs of stress, a tightening of the jaw, slight shaking of hands, and fleeting eye movements suggesting the weight of hidden truths was pressing upon him. These psychological cues confirmed what the evidence suggested. Mason had maintained his secret for years, but he was not prepared for the intensity of modern forensic scrutiny. Once in custody, Mason was read his rights, and the interrogation began under controlled conditions. Lang approached the conversation methodically, gradually presenting evidence, highlighting inconsistencies, and observing his reactions. Psychological principles guided every question, as investigators noted defensive postures, verbal hesitation, and micro-expressions that betrayed attempts to minimize or deny culpability. The tension in the room was palpable. Each statement, pause, and gesture contributed to the intricate dance of uncovering truth from layers of deception built over nearly 2 decades. Mason's eventual confession was slow and deliberate, revealing the chilling sequence of events from 2001. He admitted to luring Lily Harper near the backroad under the guise of helping with a minor fall from her bicycle. His account, corroborated by forensic evidence, described calculated movements, attempts to avoid detection, and a grim awareness of his actions' potential consequences. Psychological experts later explained that Mason's behavior reflected a deep-seated manipulative pattern, exploiting ordinary trust and situational opportunities to commit harm. The confession, though painful to hear, provided the crucial link that confirmed long-held suspicions and finally allowed justice to proceed. The Harper family, upon learning of the confession, experienced an overwhelming mixture of relief, sorrow, and disbelief. The years of uncertainty and grief were finally met with concrete resolution. While the emotional scars would remain, the knowledge that Mason could no longer evade accountability brought a profound sense of closure. The small community of Dillon, once haunted by unanswered questions and silent suspicion, could begin the process of healing, reflecting on both the tragedy and the resilience demonstrated by those affected. Detective Lang's team continued to compile evidence for trial, ensuring that every detail was thoroughly documented. The combination of confession, forensic verification, psychological analysis, and corroborating witness testimony created a compelling narrative that would withstand scrutiny in court. Legal proceedings, though inevitable, were anticipated with careful preparation, mindful of both the technical and emotional challenges inherent in presenting a case spanning 18 years. As the investigation concluded, the broader lessons became apparent. Human psychology, the passage of time, and advances in forensic technology had intersected to uncover truths long obscured. Communities were reminded of the importance of vigilance, the need to support families of missing children, and the potential for justice even when it seems delayed or unattainable. The Dillon cold case, once a source of profound despair, became an emblem of perseverance, methodological rigor, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. The day after Mason's arrest, Dillon was quiet, almost eerily so. Word had spread quickly through the small town, but many residents had yet to fully grasp the enormity of what had happened. For nearly 18 years, they had lived with a lingering tension, unspoken suspicions, and the discomfort of knowing that one of their own might have been hiding a terrible secret. Parents kept a closer watch on their children, neighbors exchanged furtive glances, and the local school held meetings to reassure families about safety measures. Yet beneath the surface, the sense of vulnerability and lingering fear remained palpable. Detective Karen Lang knew the importance of timing in such cases. While Mason's confession had provided a pivotal breakthrough, the investigation was far from complete. The team meticulously examined the details he had revealed, cross-referencing them with the archived case files, witness statements, and physical evidence collected in 2001. Each piece of corroboration strengthened the case, but it also revealed the depths of premeditation and deception Mason had employed. His narrative exposed a chilling understanding of human behavior, highlighting the ways he had manipulated ordinary interactions to his advantage. The more Lang analyzed his confession, the more it became clear that Mason had carefully observed patterns in the Harper household, selecting moments when vigilance was lowest and opportunities for escape were greatest. Reconstructing the day Lily disappeared required painstaking effort. Investigators returned to the back road where she had vanished, noting the terrain, sightlines, and potential escape routes. They spoke with neighbors who had been children themselves in 2001, hoping that memories preserved through familial storytelling might reveal overlooked details. One elderly couple remembered seeing Mason in his truck near the road around the time Lily had gone missing, a fact not included in the original police reports. Small details, such as the position of a broken fence post and the location of scattered leaves, were revisited through the lens of forensic analysis. These environmental clues, subtle but telling, painted a more complete picture of the events that had transpired that day. The Harper family struggled to reconcile the details with their memories. Megan Harper recalled the anxiety-filled weeks following Lily's disappearance, the fruitless calls to neighbors, and the agonizing wait for any news. Peter Harper recounted the toll it had taken on his professional life, his attempts to maintain normalcy while grieving, and the guilt that sometimes accompanied his inability to protect his daughter. Re-experiencing these memories was painful, yet the confirmation of Mason's culpability brought a profound sense of relief. At last, they understood what had happened, and the psychological weight of uncertainty began to lift, replaced by a determination to support the investigation to its fullest extent. Forensic analysis played a central role in Part 2 of the case. Hair and fiber samples collected from Mason's truck, his home, and other locations were matched against preserved evidence from the original investigation. Latent fingerprints found near the Harper property were also re-examined with modern techniques, providing additional confirmation of Mason's movements. DNA comparisons, now far more advanced than in 2001, offered undeniable links between Mason and the scene of the disappearance. These technical findings, combined with his confession, created a web of evidence so strong that it left little room for doubt or challenge in court. One particularly critical breakthrough involved a hidden compartment in Mason's former workshop, discovered after months of careful investigation. Inside were items that had belonged to Lily, her backpack, a notebook, and several small personal effects. Forensic teams examined these items for trace DNA, fingerprints, and other clues, establishing a direct connection to Mason. Psychologists consulted on the case noted that keeping these items for nearly 2 decades indicated a complex psychological profile, one marked by obsessive tendencies, control, and a distorted sense of ownership over the victim. These insights informed Lang's strategy for trial preparation, helping anticipate Mason's likely defenses and potential psychological responses under pressure. The interrogation phase continued in meticulous fashion. Lang and her team leveraged the psychological insights gained from analyzing Mason's behavior. They noted subtle signs of remorse intertwined with rationalization, observing moments where he struggled to maintain composure. Behavioral experts explained that these fluctuations were common among individuals who had concealed crimes for long periods, reflecting a combination of guilt, fear of exposure, and ingrained coping mechanisms. By understanding these patterns, detectives could tailor their questioning, extracting admissions while avoiding the pitfalls of confrontation that might trigger false statements or resistance. Community impact became increasingly evident as details of the case were shared in controlled, factual updates. The town of Dillon, though still grieving, began to process the reality that their collective vigilance had finally contributed to resolution. Local media coverage emphasized both the investigative breakthroughs and the Harper family's resilience, inspiring other communities to revisit cold cases with renewed determination. Psychologists highlighted the importance of closure in long-term trauma, explaining how confirmation of truth even after many years can provide emotional release and facilitate the healing process. Mason's behavior in custody revealed further aspects of his psychological profile. Investigators noted obsessive attention to detail, attempts to manipulate the narrative, and intermittent displays of vulnerability that suggested he understood the magnitude of his actions. Expert analysis suggested a blend of narcissistic tendencies and calculated premeditation, enabling Mason to maintain a facade of normalcy in daily life while harboring dark impulses. These insights were shared with the legal team to strengthen their understanding of the suspect, anticipate courtroom behavior, and prepare for potential psychological defenses during trial. As trial preparations advanced, Lang focused on ensuring that the Harper family felt supported and informed. Regular meetings explained the forensic findings, described the upcoming court procedures, and outlined strategies for presenting evidence in a compelling and emotionally responsible manner. The family's involvement was critical not only for their own closure, but also for reinforcing the human dimension of the case in court. Prosecutors emphasized the importance of conveying the full impact of Mason's actions, including the long-term emotional trauma inflicted on Lily's family and the community. A critical turning point came when investigators discovered that Mason had maintained detailed journals, written over the years, which recounted his recollections and justifications. Forensic linguists analyzed the handwriting, syntax, and narrative structures, confirming that the entries aligned with known events and corroborated physical evidence. The journals offered insight into Mason's mindset, revealing a disturbing awareness of boundaries he had violated and a meticulous record-keeping habit that ultimately contributed to his capture. Psychologists explained that this type of documentation is common among long-term offenders who obsess over control and recognition, demonstrating how seemingly mundane behaviors can be significant in criminal investigations. Meanwhile, the Harper family found solace in community support. Friends, neighbors, and advocacy groups provided emotional aid, helping them navigate the challenges of revisiting painful memories. Support networks emphasized the importance of balancing grief with resilience, allowing family members to honor Lily's memory while actively participating in the justice process. The emotional recovery was neither linear nor easy, but the combination of investigative closure and communal solidarity laid the foundation for long-term healing. Mason's legal team began preparing their defense, likely to focus on attempts to minimize culpability or question procedural accuracy. Lang anticipated these moves, ensuring that the investigation's meticulous documentation and psychological profiling could counter any potential arguments. Every piece of evidence, from forensic matches to behavioral analysis, was scrutinized for admissibility and clarity. The goal was to present a narrative that was both legally airtight and emotionally coherent, demonstrating the depth of planning, the extent of concealment, and the undeniable connection to Lily Harper's disappearance. The case also highlighted broader lessons in law enforcement and criminal psychology. Advancements in forensic science, combined with an understanding of behavioral patterns, demonstrated how long unsolved crimes could be addressed effectively. Training programs began using the Dillon cold case as a teaching example, emphasizing the integration of technology, psychological profiling, and meticulous investigative work. For families of missing children, it provided hope that even cases long considered cold could eventually yield answers by the end of Part 2. The picture was clear. Mason's capture and confession were not isolated events, but the culmination of nearly 2 decades of cumulative investigative work, forensic innovation, and psychological insight. The community of Dillon, the Harper family, and the law enforcement team had all contributed to a resolution that, while painful, represented justice and accountability. Every detail, from the hidden photograph to the journals, from DNA traces to behavioral observations, had converged to bring clarity to a case that had haunted Montana for years. The trial date finally approached, and the small Montana courthouse buzzed with tension. Nearly 18 years had passed since Lily Harper's disappearance, and the town, the Harper family, and the investigators were all acutely aware that this was the moment when truth would meet justice. The Harper family arrived early, their emotions a mixture of anticipation, fear, and cautious hope. They had spent years preparing for this day, emotionally rehearsing the narratives of their memories and the facts of the case. understanding that they would face Mason directly for the first time since his arrest. Inside the courtroom, Mason's calm exterior belied the psychological storm underneath. Behavioral experts had prepared detailed profiles, noting that he was likely to oscillate between controlled composure and subtle manipulative behaviors when confronted. Detectives and prosecutors anticipated attempts to shift blame or minimize his responsibility, but they were confident that the overwhelming evidence, DNA, journals, eyewitness accounts, and the hidden photograph would leave little room for doubt. The prosecution's strategy was meticulous, layer upon layer of corroboration, interwoven with a narrative that emphasized both the human impact of the crime and the calculated nature of Mason's actions. The opening statements set the tone. Prosecutors spoke to the jury about the Harper family's long ordeal, recounting the fear, uncertainty, and grief that had lingered for nearly 2 decades. They emphasized the advances in forensic science that finally led to Mason's arrest, demonstrating that persistence and innovation could overcome the passage of time. The courtroom listened, rapt, as the details emerged: the hidden photograph found in a dusty box, the forensic matches linking Mason to the scene, the journals meticulously documenting events in a way that left no room for doubt. The defense attempted to downplay the evidence, but the thorough preparation of the prosecution left little space for argument. Testimony from detectives formed the backbone of the case. Detective Karen Lang recounted the painstaking investigation, describing the review of archived files, revisiting the original scene, and applying modern forensic techniques. She explained the challenges inherent in revisiting cold cases: degraded evidence, faded memories, and procedural limitations. Yet, every obstacle had been met with determination, and each breakthrough brought the investigators closer to Mason. Her narrative painted a picture of methodical diligence and unwavering commitment, reinforcing the message that justice, though delayed, was not denied. The Harper family shared their own experiences during testimony, carefully conveying the emotional toll of Lily's disappearance. Megan Harper described the sleepless nights, the endless worry, and the haunting uncertainty that had defined her life for nearly 2 decades. Peter Harper spoke of the professional and personal sacrifices made in the wake of the loss, and the moments of guilt that had crept in alongside grief. Their testimony humanized the case, offering the jury a visceral understanding of the long-term impact of Mason's actions. Psychologists observing the proceedings noted that conveying such raw, personal experiences could profoundly influence the jury's perception, not only emphasizing the crime but illustrating the enduring consequences for victims' families. Mason's journals were presented as evidence, each page scrutinized for content and consistency. Linguistic experts explained how the entries aligned with known facts, and how the meticulous detail reflected premeditation rather than coincidence. The jury examined excerpts, witnessing firsthand the duality of Mason's personality: outwardly ordinary, yet inwardly obsessed and calculating. Experts described his behavior as a mix of narcissism and compulsive control, explaining how such psychological traits could allow an individual to maintain a facade for years, while committing heinous acts in secret. These analyses added depth to the evidence, moving beyond physical proof to explore the motivations and mindset behind the crime. Forensic demonstrations captured the attention of the courtroom. DNA evidence was presented with clear visuals, illustrating the matches between Mason, the hidden photograph, and items found in his workshop. Investigators detailed the process of recovering trace evidence from the original crime scene, and modern techniques that amplified and analyzed samples that had once seemed unusable. The precision of the science was emphasized, highlighting the advances that made it possible to link Mason definitively to Lily Harper's disappearance. These presentations were carefully designed to be accessible, ensuring that even jurors without technical backgrounds could understand the significance and reliability of the evidence. Witnesses, who had been children in 2001, recounted their memories, providing context and validation for aspects of the investigation. One neighbor described seeing Mason near the Harper property at a time consistent with Lily's disappearance, a detail overlooked in the original investigation. Another recalled hearing strange noises that night, which, in hindsight, aligned with Mason's account in his confession. These testimonies, though minor individually, collectively reinforced the timeline, demonstrating a convergence of independent recollections that corroborated both physical evidence and Mason's own admissions. Throughout the trial, the Harper family's resilience became a focal point. While emotional, their testimony was controlled and credible, illustrating both the suffering endured and the courage required to relive these experiences. Psychologists and criminologists observing the proceedings noted that the combination of personal narrative and scientific evidence created a compelling, multidimensional portrayal of the crime. This approach not only demonstrated Mason's culpability but underscored the profound human impact of his actions, ensuring that the jury understood both the factual and emotional dimensions of the case. Mason himself testified, though under cross-examination, his composure occasionally faltering. Detectives and prosecutors skillfully navigated his responses, highlighting inconsistencies and omissions while countering attempts to manipulate the narrative. Behavioral experts monitored his demeanor, noting micro-expressions, shifts in tone, and subtle gestures that suggested awareness of guilt and anxiety over exposure. This psychological insight allowed attorneys to anticipate his reactions and guide questioning effectively, ensuring that his testimony ultimately reinforced the prosecution's case rather than undermining it. As closing arguments approached, the weight of evidence was undeniable. Prosecutors summarized the investigation, highlighting the interplay of confession, forensic evidence, and corroborating witness accounts. They emphasized the meticulous reconstruction of the timeline, the recovery of personal items, and the psychological profile that illuminated Mason's intent and premeditation. The defense attempted to argue mitigating circumstances, but the cohesion and clarity of the prosecution's case left little room for doubt. The jury, attentive and engaged throughout, faced a narrative that combined science, human experience, and psychological understanding, compelling them to consider both the facts and the broader implications of justice delayed yet achieved. When the verdict was read, the courtroom was tense. The jury found Mason guilty on all counts, delivering a sentence that reflected both the severity of his actions and the decades-long impact on Lily Harper's family. Relief and tears mixed as Meghan and Peter Harper embraced, finally able to release years of pent-up grief and uncertainty. The community of Dillon, though scarred by the events of 2001, experienced a sense of collective closure, vigilance, perseverance, and the integration of modern forensic techniques with psychological insight had brought resolution to a case that had haunted the town for nearly 2 decades. In the aftermath, law enforcement and legal professionals reflected on lessons learned. Cold cases, once considered unsolvable, could yield results when investigators applied a combination of persistence, innovation, and understanding of human psychology. The Harper family, though forever changed, became advocates for missing children, sharing their story to encourage vigilance and hope in other families. Psychologists emphasize the importance of closure in trauma recovery, noting that confirmation of truth even after many years can facilitate emotional healing and resilience. The Dillon cold case also inspired broader discussions about investigative practices, community awareness, and the power of forensic science. Training programs highlighted the case as an example of integrating behavioral profiling with modern technology, demonstrating that even the smallest details, hidden photographs, journals, environmental traces can play pivotal roles in solving crimes. The story reinforced the principle that crimes, no matter how old, can be addressed with diligence, expertise, and patience. Finally, the Harper family began the slow process of reclaiming life after trauma. Lily's memory was honored through community initiatives, scholarships, and advocacy work. While the pain of loss remained, the knowledge that justice had been served provided a foundation for emotional restoration. Dillon, once a town shadowed by uncertainty, could now move forward with the reassurance that persistence and human insight had prevailed, proving that even the longest shadows could eventually give way to light.